My name is Sapphire Ordóñez from Mount Vernon, Washington. In my research, I learned that the Climate Commitment Act generates significant funds through carbon auctions. Some have suggested that revenue from the Climate Commitment Act can be used to help address Washington's budget deficit, while others argue that it should be strictly reserved for climate-related purposes. What do you think should be done and why?
I think that's a great question. And I think we could make a lot of great policy reasons why, or mediocre policy reasons why it might make sense to use Climate Commitment Act dollars for things that aren't necessarily climate related, especially if we're just doing it temporarily to get us through the next budget deficit. But I think it's actually coming down to a political decision. And I think one of the things we need to keep in mind is that the voters voted to retain the Climate Commitment Act with really high approval ratings. I was really proud of what our state did, and that was on the assumption about how these revenues were going to be spent. They wanted to make sure that these revenues were spent on green investments, on moving us away from carbon dioxide emissions and a polluting economy. And so I think it's really important that we honor that commitment from the voters, from the legislature, and keep those monies in the climate space.
Sapphire, that's an incredible question. Your timing is impeccable. Thank you for asking it. In a big picture, Washington State passed the Climate Commitment Act a couple years ago, and rough wag, the Climate Commitment Act has generated about $4.3 billion, where anybody that emits larger amounts of CO2 have to buy the carbon credits on the open market. The state gets that money supposedly to then invest in reducing CO2. What we have learned very recently was that the State Department of Ecology issued a report saying, I think, 8.3 million metric tons of CO2 had been saved through the Climate Commitment Act. And so that is a reasonable return on the investment from many people's perspective who support the Climate Commitment Act. Well, what we just found out a week or so ago was, oops, the Department of Ecology had an error, and that in reality it was like 83,000 metric tons of CO2 were actually reduced for that $4.3 billion that it's been raised. And if you look at it, it's almost, not exactly, but almost zero reduction in CO2 because of those carbon credits. Well, anybody, I would hope, would say, how can we have spent that much money and reduced almost no CO2? From a value perspective, $4.3 billion for zero reduction, total waste of the people's money. And so I think the conversation needs to be, okay, how committed are we to reducing CO2, and where can we get the best value for the people's money? Clearly, something isn't working right in the way either the Climate Commitment Act is working, the carbon credits, or needs to retool if that is the actual goal we want to go. Number two, and an important part of your question, is the reality of, with $4.3 billion, that's a heck of a bucket of money. In fact, rough wag, little over 5% of the entire state budget on an annual basis. That's a lot of money. An awful lot of people are trying to get their hands into that kitty. One of the problems we've seen from my perspective, and again, I'm a freshman legislator, so still learning lots, but that it has gone to fund an awful lot of government programs, some education, a lot of bureaucracy, and if those dollars are not going to actually reducing CO2, I think that's what the people want. And so if we're not doing what the people want, then we need to pull back the program. Do we need to retool it, or do we eliminate it? One of the questions in my mind is, hey, based on that last release where we allegedly eliminated almost CO2, is this the wrong solution? Is this a bad solution? One of the components of the Climate Commitment Act is that all of our energy prices have gone up as a result of that. In my district, the Clark Public Utilities gets about 35% of its electricity from a natural gas plant. Well, over a third of our electricity, Clark Public Utilities has to compete in the open market, spending money to buy the carbon credits that the state issues, and that drives up people's utility bills. And I am hearing from an awful lot of my constituents that their electric bills are getting unaffordable. Different from that, Northwest Natural Gas, a lot of people heat their homes with natural gas. They have to buy the carbon credits. And again, natural gas for home heating is going up. People are saying their total utility bills are unaffordable, less affordable. We just heard a bill the other day in the Environment and Energy Committee about trying to provide relief to poor people, low-income people, because their utility bills are unaffordable. And how do we do that? The core of it is the Climate Commitment Act credits that the big producers have to go buy. They pass that cost on to the users, and that's making our state less affordable. So I'm hoping there will be a wonderful conversation amongst legislators about, are we actually delivering value with the Climate Commitment Act money, or are we making our state less affordable and negatively impacting so many people? So that's going to be a big challenge for the use of those climate commitment dollars going forward. And again, if we're not reducing CO2, that's not doing what the people want, number one. And number two, if we're making the state unaffordable for far too many of our people, then we need to find a way to modify it.